Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. It's incredibly easy to get in angry fights on social media, especially on topics like guns, immigration, masks, vaccines, etc. How do we have better conversations? How can we show more charity for those with whom we disagree? Devin Jensen is the president of the LDS Publishing and Media Association, and he gives some ideas on how to tone down some of the divisive rhetoric that we see so often on social media. Check out our conversation. Can you talk about how can we be more charitable for those with whom we disagree?
I think that when you have that sort of open ear, listening ear to somebody else, it's going to make a big difference in how you engage with a person because you really want to understand their point of view. As we're having this conversation now, I could make some stereotypes, about a U fan or whatever.
And people do.
Yeah, and people could be
I just
BYU.
want to point out the last couple of prophets have all been Utah, man. So it's the
well
of the
said.
prophets.
Touche. I love that. School of the prophets is right. But when we say that mutual respect as we have, it immediately sets us on a good foundation to where we can communicate and listen and understand and empathize more. I always like to take this as a principle to remember that we're all children of God. If we take that, we look at each other as siblings. We might disagree with our siblings, but we want to have a relationship with our siblings. And so that makes a huge difference as well. So those would be a couple of principles that I would start out with, just listening. And then maybe a third one, I would just say, it's just be kind, right? Just be kind and compassionate, because when we can tell when somebody is not engaging with us in a respectful way, or they're just getting ready to shoot us down. But when we truly want to create more light than heat, it's going to show up in terms of our interactions with people. And so I will say this: I have had some moments over the past year, let's broaden it to a year, in let's say a pandemic situation, where I've had to set aside, now I would probably do things this way as opposed to that way. And I might even have a conversation on social media about why I think certain health practices are going to get us through the pandemic faster. But I also have to sort of set aside my notions and recognize that somebody else has a different standpoint. And so that's going to be a little tricky to navigate that. So anyway, those are some principles that I've found are helpful in terms of engaging with people in a neutral to positive way. We might also, if I were to add one more, it might be, we might state things calmly from our perspective. Here's how I've arrived at where I am today, and hopefully that will help them engage in a way that say, well, here's how I arrived at things, and have a good dialogue instead of just one person beating up the other person.
Yeah. So, that's one of the things that I've really tried to work hard on with my podcast. I will talk to people from BYU, from Utah. I will talk to people from the Community of Christ. I will talk to people from evangelicals like Steve Pineacre. And I always joked, and I think this is an easy thing to see when it's directed at us, but it's hard to see when we do it. So, we were joking about the, I always like to poke the evangelicals in the eye. When they used to have the Manti pageant and they'd have these evangelicals with the posters, Mormons are going to hell, and all those things, we can see, like, that's a very, divisive approach to conversion.
Right.
It might get one or two people, but it's probably going to cause a fight, which is what I think they really want.
Right.
And whereas when I talk with somebody like Steve, I'm doing it in a way, I know every member a missionary, we're supposed to do that.
Right.
But we need to do that in a spirit of love.
Right.
And so the problem is, in my view, especially, I remember Steve Shields, he wrote the book on he's got, it's new out now.
Yeah.
Signature Books just published it on the Kindle about the Community of Christ. Well, he's a member of the Community of Christ now, about all the different 500 denominations of Mormon churches, for lack of a better word.
Right.
And he said when he was in high school, he first attacked the community of Christ.
Right.
And of course, we have almost 100 years of fighting with them. Now we seem to get along with them pretty well.
Right.
How do we, even in our political discourse, I mean, even in church, should you wear a mask? Should you not wear a mask? Vaccine, anti-vaccine.
Right.
How do we develop that spirit of brotherhood where we're listening to each other and not fighting with each other?
Oh, what a tremendous question. And if I could answer that very decisively, you make $1 million off it. And so I'm going to only just touch on the surface of it. But I have had some engagements like this recently where I've said, okay, tell me a little bit where you are, where you're coming from. And I've listened on social media. That's my main platform.
Which is the worst place to be.
It is the worst place to be having to. It's much better to get in person. So first of all, if you can get in person, talk with a person. Second of all, if you can express your love and concern, and third, if you can say, tell me your story. Tell me why you've arrived at this. For example, let's just talk about the mask situation for a minute. What happens is people often go to a place of, well, my rights. It's my constitutional right. And I say, and so I would probably...
I don't think masks were in the Constitution.
Right, exactly. Right? And so I would probably start with something like this, like, okay, I understand generally that you're concerned about, our Constitution, and you're focused on our freedoms, and you don't want our freedoms to be taken away. And so that would be, that's common ground we both share. I feel very much the same way. So can you tell me how wearing a mask takes away your freedom in some way? And so maybe we'd start with that, and so they could kind of articulate, well, this is what I'm feeling, this is why I feel this way. And it almost always go to the core thing, which is, well, I'm concerned about my rights in some other area other than masks, and so I'm transferring my concern about the freedoms into the mask thing. Like, okay, I understand, or shots or vaccines, and so I had a good friend who's strongly conservative who said this way, and I'm quoting him anonymously because I didn't ask his permission, but he said, I am concerned about my freedoms being eroded in some area, but I don't think masks are an area where my freedoms are being eroded. And I thought, that's pretty good reasoning. He's thought that through. He's thought, my community well-being is more important than the temporary discomfort I am feeling by putting this mask on or getting a shot in the arm. And so I think that he arrived at some good reasoning to help him to sort out those two things and separate them in a way that didn't feel threatening to him. So that's the kind of dialogue I think we can have with our friends who may be a little bit right or left from where we are. We all are on some spectrum, and maybe on a spectrum on specific issues even. There might be, and so I think it's helpful to recognize that we do exist somewhere on a spectrum of political and religious beliefs, and so if we start there and start having people engage with us and tell their story, it will help us.
Well, I feel like we're in a little bit of a minefield here, but I think these are the kind of conversations we need to have. Yeah. Some other political minefields, immigration,
right?
LGBTQ,
right?
Even within the church, I think racism is a big problem still.
Right.
How do we? Can you talk about how can we be more charitable for those with whom we disagree?
Yeah, well, I do like this quote. If I could share this, I kind of prepared some notes ahead of time. Above all, be kind. This is from a 7 Keys to Successful Conversations published some years ago by the church. Above all, be kind. Show Christ-like love. President Dallin H. Oaks taught, followers of Christ should be examples of civility. We should love all people, be good listeners, and show concern for their sincere beliefs. Though we may disagree, we should not be disagreeable. Our stands and communications on controversial topics should not be contentious. When our positions do not prevail, we should accept unfavorable results graciously and practice civility with our adversaries. I even pause at the word adversaries because I think if you think about it, we're not truly adversaries, but we kind of temporarily become adversaries. But anyway, this quote continues, in any event, we should be persons of goodwill toward all, rejecting persecution of all kind, including persecution based on race, ethnicity, religious belief or non-belief, and differences in sexual orientation. So I hope by quoting President Oakes there, I'm affirming that we have to, of course, be kind, and we have to find that sort of middle ground, common ground, bridge building that will help us communicate respectfully, kindly, even though we may have profound differences in some ways with others. We are able to somehow bridge that because of our compassion and our love and our shared identity as the children of God in a way that makes us friends and not foes. I mean, you think about Lincoln, and the things that he went through in the Civil War. We've been through worse as a country and we've survived it. And so if we have that bond of civility that keeps us together and doesn't allow us to be too divided, we'll be okay. We'll make it through.
Yeah. One of the things that I really strive on my podcast is I try to be very neutral. I try very hard to not let my listeners know my personal opinions.
Sure.
Unless somebody asks me directly.
For sure.
And because I think that's fair.
Yeah.
One of the biggest issues, and I've seen this on Facebook, I've seen it on my website and other places. How do you feel? I'm trying to be neutral here. I'm just going to tell people this is where I'm not neutral.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
If you attack the church and
Yes.
say the church is a cult,
Right.
or
Right.
if you attack the community of Christ,
Right.
or even an atheist,
Right.
I'm going to come down just as hard. And I know a lot of Orthodox people are like, what do you mean? Aren't we supposed to defend the church?
Right.
And there's a place for that.
Right.
But I'm going to come down just as hard on attacking, if somebody complains that the Salt Lake Tribune
Right.
is a horrible newspaper, or the Deseret News is a horrible newspaper, to me, that's unproductive.
Right.
Okay. If you got an issue with a certain article in one of those newspapers, either being too nice to the church or too mean to the church,
Yeah.
that's the issue. But these blanket condemnations of people like Peggy Fletcher Stack or
Right.
Tad Walsh
Right.
from the Deseret News,
Right.
Peggy works for the Salt Lake Tribune.
Right.
I've seen so many people that attack, and I think they're great reporters.
Yeah.
And I have tremendous respect for both Peggy and Tad. And so we've got to stop the personal attacks, I guess.
I agree with you 100%. And I would just say, being in the media, I have noticed a darkening of feeling toward the media generally, and I include myself as part of the media. I'm an editor. I'm a writer. I'm a social media guy. So when I hear somebody say the media or the mainstream media or whatever term is thrown out there, I say, you're going to have to break that down. I want to know if you have an issue with so-and-so who is a journalist and wrote this particular article. Then we can have a conversation, because if you treat the whole group as a bunch of rotten apples, that's a very serious, damaging stereotype that is a really harmful thing. Then you can just say, well, okay, dismiss them because they're in the media. But if you say, I have these feelings why this particular article might be harmful to a particular view, that is a more productive conversation. And I would agree with you. I have tremendous respect for people, and I don't want people to be stamped out or stereotyped or grouped together as a conglomerate. I recently shared something on a I think a potentially sensitive topic, and I said, I'm not taking a side here because I care about all the people involved here, and I want to make sure that all are treated with respect. And some people were lining up on one side and on this issue and very upset, and some people were lining up on the other side. And my goal, I felt, was to sort of empathize and say, I can sense there's some pain out there on this topic, but I'm not going to choose a side because I care about you all, and I want things to work out, and I'm also going to try to be as kind and compassionate and help people who are hurting in this situation. So I've had 5 or 6 of those kinds of issues over the past 10 years or so, where I've said, I can see why this person might feel this way and this person might feel this way, but let's get along. I'm glad you brought up the Community of Christ, because there are some exciting things. There's another interfaith book that Casey Griffiths and Andrew Bolton are working on.
Casey is awesome.
Casey is awesome. Let's just pause there and just say Casey is awesome. And it's I don't think the title has been totally 100% approved, but it is Restoration in parentheses S. So, like, are there a possibility that we have multiple restorations? We're talking about our restoration cousins, if you will. For too many years, we, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, took a sort of firm stance that these others are not as much as or as good as or whatever. And eventually we came to a realization that our cousins in the restoration are so important to us that we don't want to damage our relationship by trying to beat them over the head with truth claims. We still have some truth claims that we feel are very important to us, but we recognize that they do too. And so we're starting to soften those, maybe beat our swords into plowshares and extend an olive branch. And I feel like it's been very productive, and I hope that we continue that interfaith dialogue. We've done so with the Jewish community as well, where there was some conflict, and we said, well, we have so much more in common than divides us. So why don't we just kind of work through the smaller issues and then focus on what binds us together as our faith in God and our caring for community.
Well, and I even know about a movement. There is a movement, and I know, for example, the Temple Lot Church. Okay, that Church of Christ is their official name, Temple Lot.
Church of Christ, Temple Lot.
Also known as the Hedrickites. Yeah. We're known as the Brighamites.
Right.
And the Community of Christ known as the Josephites.
Right.
Back in, I want to say it was the 30s, I believe it was the Temple Lot said, wouldn't it be great if, of course, they were known as the RLDS churches at the time, and the LDS church all joined back together. Right. And there is even today, I think Patrick McKay and his brother, do you know his brother?
Locke? Is that, I don't know if
no, there are 2 McKay brothers. Okay. Patrick and, anyway, I believe they're with Restoration branches. They're still trying to get the LDS church, the RLDS church, the Hedrickites all together. Okay. And I don't know that will ever happen, but I love the camaraderie that we've cut down a lot of that divisiveness.
Right.
And I'd love to see that. It seems like there's still a little bit with the fundamentalist groups. We're still like, I don't know, we don't want to get too close to them.
Right. There are probably some reasons why that's a little sensitive, because for a lot of reasons. But yeah, you're right. That's probably the one case where it's been difficult to sort of mend fences. But these other restoration branches, we've got really good friends. We are working on that relationship. Keith Wilson's done a lot, and that Locke Mackay has done a lot of stuff with that. So I think if we keep that trajectory going, we'll realize that we have so much in common. Let's focus on community. Let's focus on Christ, and build bridges and sort of have a common communion. I'm not suggesting literal communion, which would be yet another topic to bring up, but at least that sort of high level communion that we can we can be brothers and sisters.
Well, and I know John Whitmer Historical Association, that's a great place. They're kind of like MHA, but the Community of Christ started it instead of us. And that you really feel a lot more camaraderie in that group.
Absolutely. John Whitmer is a terrific organization, and I've got friends who have been very involved. Scott Esplin has been very involved in that, and I'm trying to think if there's some other names, Alex Baugh, and a lot of other folks who have said, hey, let's build some bridges and have some good connections and help each other out.
I went to my first conference. It was in Palmyra about 2 years ago. It was so much fun. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
A lot smaller than MHA, but a lot more diverse, too. You get a lot more other groups.
I hope I'm not spoiling anything by letting you know they're coming up on their 50th anniversary next year, and that'll be in Independence, I believe. And they're going to come out with a book that will be sort of sharing our common heritage, and that's the one that Casey and Andrew are working on. And I think by now it's public. If not, it is now. But it is a very exciting outreach. Andrew Bolton.
Oh, okay. He used to be an apostle for the Community of Christ.
Yes.
Yeah. I need to get him on too.
He'll be great. Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Devin Jensen, president of LDS PMA. In our next conversation, Devin's going to give us a sneak peek into the book he's writing on the LDS Church in the Pacific.
As a result of this, I decided to gather all these into a book, and so now we have we're getting ready to submit this book for publication, and it's going to be called something along the lines of From Battlefields to Temple Grounds. And it's going to be the Latter-day Saints in Guam and Micronesia, something along those lines. And it's going to talk about some very briefly. It'll start with Magellan, because that's the intersection 500 years ago with the Chamorro people on Guam, and the complexity of that colonial influence.
If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please subscribe for just $5 a month at patreon.com/gospeltangents, and you can hear the entire interview before everybody else. If you'd like to watch the entire video for just $8 a month, you can either subscribe on YouTube, Patreon, or my website, gospeltangents.com. Just click the yellow subscribe button, and I'll add you to our Gospel Tangents Insiders group so that you can see entire videos. For those interested in a PDF transcript, you can subscribe at either Patreon or on my website. For just $10 a month, I'll send you a PDF as soon as it's complete. If you'd like a copy of the paperback as well as a PDF, just sign up for $20 a month at either Patreon or my website, gospeltangents.com. Of course, you can buy individual transcripts at amazon.com and just do a search for Gospel Tangents Interview, and you can see all the things that we have there. Don't forget to support Gospel Tangents with an awesome t-shirt like one of these. You can subscribe at Apple Podcasts at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. Get our latest updates at facebook.com/gospeltangents. Also, you can get our Twitter updates at Gospel Tangents. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got more of our great videos. Thanks again.